Welcome to Heal Yourself Connection, where it's all about self-discovery. How well do you know yourself? A question that I didn't know the answer to. So I started with self-discovery and came to the conclusion there are so many different ways for it. Luckily, there are also many different people for it. So each one can connect to the way that feels right for them. So I want to learn more about this and share this with you. Are you ready for asking the question, who am I? I am. So let's do this! Welcome to the second episode of Heal Yourself Connection. I'm very glad that I can do this. Today I have Dr. De Leon Alvin from Canada as a guest speaker. He's a man full with passion to help others, chiropractor, and teaches about GNM. GNM means German New Medicine. Today we'll learn about GNM and how we can interpret the language of the body. You can say that GNM is a combination of a natural healing and self-growth. You can learn so much about your body and the symptoms that you get. It can help you to understand with what part in life you struggle. The body never lies. When you start to become aware of the messages the body gives you, you can learn about that and how you are perceiving life. So, I'm really excited to start and hear more about this. So, welcome, Dr. Alvin De Leon. It's a great honor to have you here on the podcast, and thank you for accepting the invite. So...
No problem. It's exciting.
Yeah, for me too. I'm very nervous, but it will be fine.
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
We'll have fun. It's a conversation. It's all good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Today we're going to talk about the 5 biological laws, and Dr. Alvin will help us with us. So can you give some introduction of the 5 biological laws?
Yes, so really the 5 biological laws is based on Dr. Hammer's research on the science of German New Medicine, or GNM. Mm-hmm. I was exposed to Dr. Hammer's research probably 9 years ago now. Mm-hmm. My background is as a chiropractor. So I was practicing as a chiropractor for about 7 years already prior to getting exposed to GNM. And really what's great about German New Medicine and GNM is that you look at the person as a biological unit. So it's not just focusing on the organ or the part of the body that's injured. You look at what's happening at the emotional psyche level, and you look at what's happening at the brain level, as well as what's happening at the organ level. So Dr. Hammer really, he recently just passed away in July. And so all of his research has been around since the 1980s, and he really summarized GNM in what he calls the 5 biological laws. And the first biological law pretty much just states that every so-called disease, what we call in GNM as a biological program, originates from an unexpected biological conflict shock. So that means that when we have these unexpected events in our lives, so it could be something big, like somebody dying, losing your job, a breakup or a divorce. So that could be unexpected or a shock, or it could just be something small, a criticism, a comment, a text message or email that caught you off guard. But the idea behind it in the first biological law is when we have these unexpected events, we have a subconscious and subjective interpretation or experience of that event. And depending on how you experience it, it will actually create an impact in the brain that's measurable on a CT scan. And where that impact goes in the brain, it will then initiate a physiological response in the organ controlled from that specific area of the brain. And so in the end, when we have these unexpected conflicts, it affects us at the level of the psyche, the brain, and the organ. So it affects us at all 3 levels. And ultimately, it's these changes at the organ level that eventually manifest as the symptoms that you and I experience. So that's, in a nutshell, what the first biological law is about, right? And so most of us, we can look back now in our lives thinking about, all the times that you had a symptom that came out of nowhere. You could probably identify that before that or around that time, something unexpected and emotionally distressing was going on in your life. So that's the first biological law. The second biological law really goes into this idea that there's 2 phases to every biological program, provided there's a resolution to that conflict. And so that really states that when we have these unexpected conflicts in our lives, actually in GNM, these unexpected biological conflicts are known as a DHS, or a Dirk-Hammer syndrome, in honor of Dr. Hammer's son. So when we have a DHS, this unexpected event that caught us off guard, that was emotionally distressing, we automatically enter the first phase, which is known as the conflict active phase. During this phase, there's already going to be an impact somewhere in the brain, and there's already going to be changes initiated in the organ controlled from that area of the brain. But most of the time, we don't feel those symptoms or those changes at the organ level during the first phase, or the conflict active phase. The only thing that we experience during that phase is at the psyche level, we're preoccupied with the conflict. We're stressed. We can't get it out of our minds. We're thinking about that comment or that email or that criticism. And at the organ level, because we're stressed, our blood vessels constrict, so we have cold hands and cold feet during that active phase. And you get interrupted sleep, and you don't have much of an appetite. It's almost like your entire body is saying, we don't want to be in this stress state. We need you to wake up. You don't have time to eat. We need you to resolve this conflict because we want to get out of this stress state. Now, the moment that conflict gets resolved, you enter the second phase, which is the healing phase. And the thing about a healing phase is, and you know this, whenever we injure ourselves, like you sprain an ankle, fluid will go to the area that's healing in order to protect it while it heals. And so when we resolve these conflicts, we enter the healing phase. Fluid will go to the organ that was affected, and fluid will go to the part of the brain that had that impact. So oftentimes, a lot of the symptoms that we experience, the headaches, the dizziness, the lightheadedness, the swelling, the pain, the inflammation, the discharge, all of these symptoms often show up in the healing phase, which is already when the conflict was resolved. And so this is a really important discovery, the second biological law, the law of the 2 phases, because most of us have never been taught to look for these 2 phases. We just assume that you're either healthy, meaning you have no symptoms, and then you're sick, which means you have symptoms. And now, with Dr. Hammer's research, realize that you can already be in a biological program, already be distressed, already be in the conflict active phase, not have much symptoms, actually have a lot of energy, but you've got cold hands, you've got cold feet. So that means you're in the first phase already. And it's when you resolve that conflict that you enter the second phase, which is the healing phase, which is when the symptoms show up.
And mostly we go to the doctor when we are in the second phase, like because we are in pain or we feel the headache or
Yes, and that's really what makes Dr. Hammer's research, what makes GNM very unique and very different and really revolutionary is that we're able to now understand what's happening at what point during this biological process, right? We're able to identify that I must be in the healing phase if I have swelling, headaches, pain. And if I have cold hands, I'm not sleeping, I don't have much of an appetite, I must be in an active phase. And then we're gonna know that, okay, if I'm not sleeping, what happened today at work, in my relationships, in my family that was unexpected and emotionally distressing? So now you can go look for the conflict. So that really summarizes the first and second biological law and how we can apply it. The third biological law goes more into the science of embryology and how, the science of why that organ is controlled from that part of the brain is because they share the same embryologic germ layer. So this is now going into more for those that are really into the science and biology and embryology, the science geeks. It's great because it's the validation and the verification of why things are happening the way they're happening in the body. And so it goes a lot into embryology and human evolution, and how those two really are the foundation of science and health moving forward. So that's really the third biological law. It's the embryological aspects of why that organ, what kind of changes are happening in that organ, why it's controlled from that area of the brain. Okay. Now the fourth biological law goes into the beneficial role of microbes. So one of the things that Dr. Hammer found is that everything in nature really serves a purpose. It's working towards self-preservation and growth. And because we're part of nature, there can't be things happening within our system that's not trying to preserve us or help us to grow. And that includes microbes. And so he discovered that microbes are actually dormant in our systems when we don't have a biological program running. The moment we have an unexpected shock, the moment we have a DHS, if microbes are going to be necessary in the repair of the tissue in the healing phase, they will start to get mobilized the moment we have that shock. And the microbes start to grow and proliferate. The moment that conflict is resolved and whatever changes in that organ is no longer needed, because again, this goes into the more in-depth science that, you know, depending on what part of the body is affected, you're either going to get cell growth happening or tissue ulceration in that organ. And when that conflict is resolved, the cell growth stops and the organ is restored back to its natural state, or the ulceration is refilled. And what Dr. Hammer found is that microbes and bacteria play a very important role in the repairing process and in the restoration process of that organ, which is why we often, it's often discovered in the person that when you have a cough and discharge and phlegm, when you have stomach pain and diarrhea, it's easy to find active bacteria in that organ that was affected. It's because the bacteria is not causing those symptoms, it's actually restoring that organ back to its natural state. So this is a very different understanding of microbes, which is a real challenge for most of us, especially health practitioners, because we've been trained that the microbe is the cause of the disease, not the microbe is assisting in the repair of the organ. And so one of the ways that I try to relate this to people is that if you imagine yourself flying over a city in a helicopter, and you're flying and you look down in the city and you say, you know, it's funny, I never see any red fire trucks when I'm flying around in this helicopter. There's no red fire trucks. The only time I ever see a red fire truck is when there's a fire. So that means the red fire trucks must be causing the fire. So do you see how that's pretty much the observation and the conclusion that microbiologists historically have found? That it's interesting, I look at your stomach when you don't have diarrhea or stomach pain or a fever, and I don't see active bacteria there. But when you have vomiting or when you have diarrhea and when you have bloating and when you have pain and when you have a fever, I find active bacteria in your stomach. Then the bacteria must be causing that symptom. And so you see how when you look at it from that analogy, that the fire trucks only show up because it's trying to maintain and save the integrity of a building or a home, not causing fire. Well, that now makes us look at microbes differently, that in fact, they're there, they're dormant, they're not needed until there's a repair that needs to be done. And so they show up to repair that tissue so that it can restore the integrity of that organ. Okay, so that's a very important you know, aspect of minimizing our fears around so-called infections and what that really means. Okay, so that's the fourth biological law. And the fifth biological law, it's really the summarizing what Dr. Hammer calls the quintessence. And the fifth biological law states that diseases, so-called diseases, are actually meaningful biological special programs of nature inherent in all organisms in order to assist that organism in dealing with a distressing situation. So the fifth biological law sort of summarizes everything. This idea that everything in the body is working with us, that there is no such thing as a war within our body, that the body is only trying to preserve itself and to grow and to help you to sort of stay alive. And this idea that when the symptom is there, it means that there's something you need to work on in order for the body to survive, in order for it to deal with that emotionally distressing situation. So that, in a nutshell, is really the 5 biological laws.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's very interesting. So how can people look at themselves with the 5 biological laws, like because you're telling that it has to do with the emotions, so, and you have to work on that emotion, so how can they reflect the 5 biological laws on themselves?
Well, I mean, and that's really the main question, right? It's like, okay, this sounds great. Like, okay, so you're telling me that, you know, my stomach issues and diarrhea, it's not because I'm allergic to milk. It's because at dinner that night that I woke up with it, my boyfriend told me that he wanted to break up with me and that he's been cheating on me for the last 3 months. So that was a shock. That made me angry. So it's an indigestible morsel. It's an indigestible anger conflict, which affects small intestine, colon. So now I've got this diarrhea issue. What do I do with this? How do I apply it so that I can overcome my symptoms? Well, I think the first step really is that I've realized over the 9 years of using GNM is that it's not that it's not for everybody. Not everybody's ready for it, okay? Because there's 2 things that have to be involved for a person to be ready to truly learn about GNM. Number 1, you have to be frustrated with what's currently going on regarding your health. You have to be frustrated. You have to realize that there's no answers. You have to be frustrated that nobody can tell you why. You have to be frustrated that you can't seem to figure out why this is happening, and you know you've been dealing with the symptoms for a long time and you still can't get rid of it. So that's the first step. If the person is not frustrated, meaning they have an answer, like I have stomach pain, I take medication, it goes away. So I'm good. So if they're not frustrated, they're not ready to really learn this. The second step is that you have to be open to discovering something new. Ultimately, if you're just looking for something to confirm what you already know, then it's going to be a challenge, right? Because as you know, in your own discovery, in your own work with GNM, Sylvia, like this is a totally new perspective. It's a totally new paradigm. So you have to be open to learning something different. So those are the 2 things that I think people that are listening or watching have to already, you know, ask themselves. Am I frustrated with my current knowledge and state of where I am regarding health? And am I open to learning something different than I've ever heard before? So that's the key. And for me, that was the case in my clinical practice. I mean, I was a chiropractor already for 3 or 4 years. I was frustrated because some people would come in with severe back pain, 1 adjustment, nothing complicated, miracle, the pain goes away. I get the same, a different person, same presentation, nothing complicated, severe back pain, 3 months, twice a week of adjustments, no change. And so I would get frustrated. What's wrong? Am I missing something? How come one person gets better in 1 visit, another person 3 months of twice a week, there's no change. And so that prompted me to look. And because I was already open to different ways of looking at the body, it was easy for me to sort of, you know, learn about GNM and then try to implement it. So how can you do this? You know, how can your audience do this when they first hear about the 5 biological laws? You have to first be able to look at yourself and realize that whatever symptom I'm dealing with right now that has no explanation that makes sense to me, okay? Because there's going to be a lot of things out there that people are going to say, well, it's the food, it's your environment, it's an allergy, right? There's lots of those. But if it doesn't make sense to you because I've eaten that food for 35 years, why is it at 35 all of a sudden I can't eat it, right? When you look at that, you have to now examine before or around the time that my symptoms showed up, what could have been going on in my life that was unexpected? And that's where you have to go. What was going on that was unexpected and it was distressing for me at that time? And that's all you have to do in the beginning.
Yeah.
You have to just look for, start the process of examining what was going on in your life from an emotional conflict perspective, because nobody tells us to do this, right?
Yeah, no,
Nobody's going to tell you when you wake up next week that your right shoulder is hurting to look at what was going on regarding feeling devalued in a relationship, where you felt guilty about a relationship, or something unexpected happened regarding a relationship. No one's going to do that. But if you understand GNM, or you get exposed to this idea, you start to look that way.
Yeah.
The next time you have a bronchitis, the next time you have, vomiting, the next time you have back pain, you start looking for what was unexpected in my life that was going on, and what was potentially distressing for me. Yeah. So I think that's, for people that are totally new, I encourage them to learn about it. But how do you start? I think you start that way. Yeah. Very small steps. You just look at, okay, I had a cough last week. It lasted 3 days. What was going on before that cough showed up? When I look it up, I learned that a cough is a scare. What was going on that could have scared me, before that cough showed up? And that's how you start to try to implement it.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. That helped to change it around, because you have to think, the opposite. How do you say it in English? You have to say, you have to think like the other way around, like. But yeah, I love GNM, and like you say, I'm always looking back. Okay, 3 days ago, what happened, and maybe you can give some examples for the people, like.
Sure. Like, I mean, that's like like you can imagine. I feel very fortunate because when you first learn this, I remember learning it sitting in that classroom for 4 days. Your mind is going crazy because, oh my gosh, everything that I've been taught my entire career. So as a chiropractor, my degree in psychology, my degree in science, everything that I've been taught, oh my gosh, this is now starting to question it. So it's not easy for those of you that are going to, learn about this initially. It is going to be a bit of a shock to your system to think that this is happening. But what I did initially is you have to be willing to question it, and you have to be willing to find answers to those questions. So that's how you start, right? You have to question it, and you have to try to get those answered. And then you have to develop the ability to use it and apply it in a practical way. And that's really what I started to do. In my clinical practice, in the beginning, it was very difficult because people were coming to me as a chiropractor. They're coming in, they want to get adjusted. They don't want to talk about their mother. They don't want to talk about what's going on. And I would get patients that would get angry. They're like, listen, I didn't come to you to see a psychologist and talk about my mother. I came here to get adjusted. And I'd sort of, be shocked a little bit. Okay, I had to learn how to communicate it better. But I remember one of the first cases early on that really started to develop my confidence. And I remember this one guy coming in, and he said that he hurt his back. He woke up with it, and he thought his back pain was because he was playing basketball the night before. And then he woke up on Friday morning. He woke up with severe back pain. He could barely move to come into the clinic, and he thought it had to do because he played basketball on Thursday night. And I said, well, that's fine, but if it's a physical trauma, obviously I want everybody to understand that, if you fall, if you get into a car accident, if, somebody hits you in the back, well, that's a physical trauma causing your pain. That's not because of an unexpected conflict necessarily. What we're talking about is you didn't have any physical trauma, it's unexplained, and now you have to look for the conflict. And so when I brought this up with him, he said that, I asked, do you remember actually injuring it while you were playing basketball? And he said, no, he just assumed it must have been, right? But he didn't injure it. He didn't have a fall. He played the entire night, 2 hours, and he got home that night. Everything was fine. He woke up with the pain on Friday morning. So I started explaining to him, there's usually 2 ways that you can get this kind of pain. Either you have a physical trauma or you have some sort of unexpected emotional distress, something that was a stress for you earlier in the week. Because remember the 2 laws, the second biological law, the pain comes in the healing phase, which means if he woke up with pain Friday, Thursday he resolved something. He relaxed about something Thursday that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was a stress for him.
Yeah.
So this is what I asked him. What was going on early in the week that was a stress for you? And he told me he was actually a football coach. So in the US, it's, or in Canada, it's football, like American football, not soccer, football. So he was a football coach. And he was telling me that, you know, I did have a shock on Monday because on Monday, his principal at the school, he gave away the time he had allotted for the football field. So their season was going to start. So we had football training. So we reserved the football field, but the principal didn't know and gave it away to another team. So he didn't have football fields available for his training in the next couple of weeks. So this was a shock to him. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, he was on the phone calling all sorts of fields in the area so he could, because his training was going to start in a couple of weeks, he needed to secure football fields. And guess what day he finally got the field secured? Thursday. He made the final phone call. The fields are good. He relaxes. He goes to play basketball. Everything's good. He wakes up the next day with the pain. So again, the difference here is that low back has to do with a self-devaluation regarding lack of support. Whenever you feel unsupported, whenever you feel devalued and unsupported, it creates changes in the tissues of the low back. And that's sort of what presents as low back pain when you resolve that conflict. And so in this case, it made sense to him. Literally, I saw him one visit. It was 2 or 3 days of that conflict. By the next day, he felt better. By the weekend, everything was back to normal. Okay, so again, it starts to build your confidence in the beginning, just knowing that they can tell you, oh, actually, that's funny that you asked that. This did happen before. And that, for me, was the beginning. And as you can imagine, in 9 years, I have tons of case studies. I mean, even more than I can write about. I have to, you know, write more cases now because there's just so much that I see every day. And I feel very fortunate that every day that I see a case of a patient that has tried everything, they've been to every practitioner, nobody knows what's going on, and literally in that first visit, when we can make them become aware of the conflict, a week later, 80% improvement, 70% improvement. I mean, they can't believe it, right? So I get to see that every day, and I really wish that those people that are trying to learn GNM are in the room with me and they get to experience it, because it really builds the confidence and certainty. Nothing like the practical experience builds the certainty that there's something to this science, right?
Yeah, and it's I really love it that you do it, and you are a doctor, and I think for a patient that gives us more confidence to like, oh, okay, he's telling that, and also the conflict with us is like, oh, that matches. It's like, okay then. So it's really, I really love that you're
definitely
teaching
makes, I mean, you know what? It's not easy in the beginning. I mean, I've spoken to some friends who are medical doctors in other countries, and it's not easy to practice with GNM initially. But I find that over time, the practicing improves your communication. You start to get better at how to communicate it. And really, a lot of it, the art is being able to make the patient comfortable enough to understand it and to be able to look for the conflict. Because obviously, you know, for a lot of people, the first time you say, well, what was going on unexpected, you know, some of these things are going on for a year and a half, for you know, 20 years. Like, how are we going to find that? But if you get very comfortable with asking the right questions, making the patient understand what it's about so they can look, a lot of times they surprise me at how often they can remember. So that just comes with the practice, though. I mean, you know, and I'm pretty persistent. Like I've got so much confidence in the science now that it's like, no, for sure there was something that happened. We've just got to look. We've got to trigger it in your mind. And then when we find it, we see a result, right? So that's what I like. That the thing with GNM, using it clinically, is that I tell my patients within a week, you are going to experience a change in symptoms. It doesn't mean it goes away completely, but you feel a significant difference if we get the right conflict. if we don't get the right conflict in 1 week, you tell me there's nothing different, then we have to look for something else. And that's what I like. We don't waste any time. We go, if in 1 week there's not a lot of change, we've got to look for something else, and hopefully we can identify it, because once you do, the body responds fairly quickly. And this is one thing to point out to your audience, is that people start to think like, so what's the therapy really? Well, a lot of it really comes down to the knowledge of understanding what's happening. That number one, you're already in healing. And then number two, it's related to this emotional conflict that you experience. The awareness alone, that consciousness, helps to relax the psyche. And because the shock was experienced at the psyche level, the healing has to happen at the psyche level. Okay, and once you start to relax, because you know what? That makes sense that this allergy started when I was 8 because my parents moved me to a different school. That stinks. That did. I was fed up with that. That wasn't a good thing for me back then. It makes sense. But now as an adult, that's not an issue anymore. And just that ability to recognize that. I've had a patient with 25-year allergies, 365 days a year, have 4 days with no symptoms after the first visit of them realizing that it actually stems from when they were 8 years old and their parents moved them to a different neighborhood. Wow. And so that's amazing, right? Like, and I was shocked that he remembered that, but he brought it up. You know, he said like, you know what, I know what it is, and this is the conflict. And again, when you see that over and over and over again, case after case, it's hard to deny, you know, the validity of Dr. Hammer's research.
You have to move to Belgium.
I'm sure you can find here. There's probably people, I mean, depending on what part of Europe you're from, I'm sure there's people practicing longer than me. As you can imagine, Dr. Hammer started teaching this in the 80s. So it was, you know, I'm fortunate. It was translated into English in 2007, and I learned it in 2009. So in the English-speaking community, I'm probably one of a handful of people that are practicing with it in the English-speaking community. But if you go to other parts of Europe and South America, I'm sure there's people a lot more experienced than me. So I'm just lucky to be doing it.
I hope it will keep growing everywhere, because it's so fascinating, and it just always, it's always right, and it matches, and I really love it.
Yeah, it's really, you know what, in the end, what it does, what Dr. Hammer has left us, his legacy is really that he's allowed us to interpret the language of the body. Really, and he even admits, he's such a humble guy that he says, you know, I didn't discover these biological laws, I just rediscovered them. Like, these things have been going on in our lives. I just happen to tap into an ability, being born in the period where CT scans are available, that I'm able to piece this together. This isn't my discovery. This has been going on throughout life. So he just unlocks it. He now gives us this ability to interpret what the body is saying, what our symptoms are saying. That if the body can handle things, we don't get a symptom. If the body needs our help, it needs our awareness, needs our consciousness, we're gonna get a symptom. And that's now, when you understand that, it's almost, you know, this amazing relationship that we start to develop with our bodies, that our body is working with us, that, you know, you can tell yourself that I'm not an angry person. You know, I've worked on myself. I read all the self-help books. I know how to deal with my anger. But if you have chronic digestive issues, you're interpreting unexpected events as an indigestible anger, period. Do you see what I mean? Like, your body will not lie. You can lie to yourself that you're not angry and nothing makes me angry. But if things don't go the way you expect, and then you have to run to the bathroom with diarrhea and chronic digestive issues or bloating or pain, you experience that event subconsciously as an anger. So that means that you have to now work on letting go of that anger, or not experiencing these unexpected events as anger. Why do I do that? How can I change that? And this is where I believe there's really you know, what I try to do is combine or fuse natural healing with personal growth. And that's really what GNM does. And Dr. Hammer didn't call it personal growth, you know, that terminology that wasn't around in the 80s necessarily, but that's really what it is. The moment you can outgrow an old perspective over how you see unexpected events in your life, the symptom starts to go away. And so there's an entire self journey, self-awareness, consciousness that has to happen for us to overcome some of these symptoms. And I think it's a beautiful way of looking at symptoms and disease and health. Like, we don't look at it as this thing that's we don't want, or I want to avoid, or I want to prevent. We start to embrace it as an opportunity for us to learn about ourselves and for us to grow to a different level of consciousness, right?
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love what you just said. It was so much insight and wisdom. So thank you very much for sharing that. So,
but it's, I mean, to me, that's, as you learn this, you start to appreciate that, because as you know, Sylvia, in the beginning, it's all about just the content, right? It's like, I just want to get this. I just want to learn the biological laws. I want to learn each program. What does back pain mean? What does skin rash mean? So you're caught up in the didactic sort of like content, but then as you step away, because you understand it, you start to, it becomes a part of you and part of your life. You start to almost look at it from a more philosophical sort of, you know, global perspective, and you start to appreciate, like, wow, this is very profound. Like, this will change our entire, you know, perspective of health and relationships and people and how we treat people. Like, it's got such deep, you know, ramifications of how much better life can be once this gets to that universal sort of consciousness that everybody just understands how the body works now. Because then we don't have to be afraid. And that really, for me, has been, you know, my entire, you know, if you follow my videos or if you see everything that I post on social media, it's all about how can I get you to become less afraid when it comes to your health and more empowered when it comes to doing that, realizing that you have control. And that's really what GNM affords us. It makes you not afraid of your symptom, because the symptom is trying to guide you on what you have to work on. And because if you understand that, it shows you that you actually have control, that if I can work on my anger, if I can work on my abandonment issues, if I can work on my fear of separation, then I don't have the skin rash anymore, or my kidney issue, or my back pain. So it's just this amazing interplay. And I really think most people, unfortunately, that only dabble, like it's a very superficial understanding of GNM, and they think it sounds just like mind-body medicine. It sounds just like all of this other, you can manifest your life based on what you think kind of thing, and it sounds like all these other things. Unfortunately, they're not going to go deep enough to really understand the magic that it's available for us in terms of how to really live our lives without fear and with this level of empowerment. And I think it's unfortunate, but it's going to be a process, because it's so revolutionary what's in front of us with this.
I really love the GNM. Can you maybe tell us, like, why you want to bring this to the world? Why this, it's like your passion, if I hear you talk, like, wow.
You know, it's interesting, because I don't think I ever thought my passion was going to be GNM, because I don't know if it's necessarily that. I think that looking back at my life, one of the things that I only now in hindsight, I've come to learn about myself, is that I was always somebody that was good at giving people a different perspective on things, right? Ever since I was in, you know, elementary, when I was in grade 7 or grade 8, you know, my friends would come to me and tell me that, you know, they have a problem with this person. So they tell me their side, but because I was also friends with that person would come to me and tell me their side of the situation. And so I almost felt like I was always in that situation where I always got two sides of every situation, that every conflict people were dealing with. When I got to high school, you know, I was friends with with some of the girls, and they'd tell me the problems in their relationship. But then I was also friends with their boyfriends. So then they would tell me the problems, and I would always have this ability to help them to look at it from a different perspective. Yeah. And then as I got older, it was the same thing. My parents would tell me what was going on because it was hard to deal with my sister, and my sister would tell me her side of the situation. Yeah. So I think that for me, my special sort of gift that I'm passionate about is that I believe that there's more than one way to look at every situation. And that I think my makeup of who I am, it comes across that when I'm helping you to look at it differently, in a way it inspires you, or in a way it comes across as very inspiring and valuable, so that you can change the way you look at your life in some capacity. So that, I think, has always been within me my entire life, right? I don't think I'm trying to be inspirational or passionate. I'm just speaking. But the challenge was this. When I got into originally I got into psychology, I got into chiropractic, but you couldn't utilize that as a chiropractor. It was like hands-on, physical, and so there was not a lot of talking. You'd come in, and I think that's why I was searching, because I needed to be able to connect with a person in a way that I can help them look at their life differently, in a way that will improve it or inspire them. And it was only when I was introduced to GNM that I realized, oh my gosh, this is perfect for who I am. Because look, I have to help you figure out your conflict. So I have to be good at communicating. I have to be good at listening, because I have to listen to, what's really going on in your life. This isn't about your money. This isn't about money. This is about your relationship with your mother. So I have to be good at that. And I have to be good at helping them look at it differently, because that's how you resolve a conflict, is that how do you look at this situation that looks like a bad thing in a different way, so that it makes you feel actually good about it, which is like I just mentioned, that's been my entire life, sort of my gift. So all of these things sort of line up, that now I feel very fortunate that I found this vehicle to be able to use my natural gifts, my natural talent, to help somebody from a health perspective. Like I really believe that, what I'm trying to do with my social media posts, with my talks, with these kind of interviews, with giving presentations every month, streaming it on Instagram, like I really think that as a whole, most people are ready, or they're just tired of being afraid when it comes to health. Like most people are tired of like having to worry about how many glasses of water am I supposed to drink now? How much, what am I supposed to cut out of my diet? How many coffees am I supposed to have? How many days am I supposed to work out? How much, what's my heart rate supposed to be at? What practitioner am I supposed to go see? What supplements am I supposed to take? Like I really believe that most people are living these types of lifestyle changes because they're scared. Not because they're inspired. They're doing it because if I don't have enough water, take this supplement, see my practitioner this many visits, or exercise 3 days a week, or do yoga and meditate, I'm going to get a disease. And then I don't want that, right? So most people are really not doing it because they're inspired to live that way. They're doing it out of fear. And I think that for me, I almost feel like I've been fortunate that I've been able to unlock that I don't have to be afraid. Like, you can make those choices of health and lifestyle because you're inspired, not because of what's going to happen if you don't do them. And so that's been a big motivator for me, is that I feel like there's enough people today that are just sick and tired of being scared regarding their health, that this might be the right time to get them to realize that they're in more control than they think, and that the body's not the enemy. That the food is not the enemy, that the environment is not the enemy, that there is no enemy, that it's really just this understanding of noticing why I look at the world like this. Why is it that whenever somebody cancels, whenever somebody doesn't show up, it makes me angry? Why is it that I feel unsupported whenever that happens? And now I've got this back pain, or I've got this digestive issue. Once you learn about that, you actually learn about yourself and what you need to do so you can grow. So I really think that unfortunately, in the 80s, when Dr. Hammer was around in the 90s, people weren't ready for that. No, you know, and I really don't think everybody's really ready for it today yet. But my belief is that there's more people ready to hear it today than there's ever been in my entire life. There's at least a better chance, right? That people are more open. But isn't it, you know, we just had the GNM conference in Toronto, in Vaughan a couple of weeks ago, and we were sitting around having dinner, and we're saying, isn't it funny how, you know, we can be having dinner with friends, and you and I, Sylvia, will say, hey, Sylvia, did you hear about this new research that, you know, if you eat gum made with this red dye, you could get throat cancer, or you can get a colon cancer. And everybody will be like, oh my gosh, really? That's interesting. Where did you hear that? Yeah. And we can have a conversation about that, right? Everyone feels safe talking about how this chemical, this dye in bubble gum can cause colon cancer. But if you and I have the same conversation and we say, hey, Sylvia, did you hear about this thing called GNM where, you know, colon cancer is actually because of an unexpected conflict that made somebody angry? That whenever you get angry and it lasts for a long period and it's very intense, it can develop into a diagnosis of a colon cancer. Do you see how most people will be like, oh, where'd you hear that? That sounds a little bit crazy. I don't know, but I don't believe that. I don't agree. Like, isn't it interesting how people automatically get defensive when we're talking about how a condition is tied to an emotional experience? But when we say that this condition is tied to a chemical, something external, something you're eating, it's like everybody jumps in on the conversation. But right, isn't that interesting? But the moment it becomes about something emotional and personal, and like, you know, because now it's like, oh my gosh, my father had colon cancer, so you're saying he was an angry person or something, or everybody gets defensive, right? It's almost like we don't want to be vulnerable, that we're being affected emotionally by these unexpected things in our lives. And my thing is, yes, I understand. I empathize why. Like, I don't want people to necessarily know what makes me angry or scared, but you're only going to grow when you're able to face, or you have the maturity to face your own vulnerability. Right? Like, if it's like you can't get help if you're denying that you have a problem. And so this is really, to me, it's a fascinating dynamic to observe, because most people that I know that are friends that are excited about GNM, they're excited about GNM, they want to bring it up, they talk about it at the dining room table or at Thanksgiving or at Christmas, and people get all, you know, defensive, and they don't, you know, they're like, oh, that sounds like a bunch of hogwash. But if it's about chemicals and something in the bubble gum, it's like, oh, that's interesting. You know, maybe I should avoid eating red bubble gum now. It's such a fascinating thing to observe. Right? So, you know, I don't know where I was going with that, but back to your question of why am I doing this? I really believe it's to minimize people's fears. It's to help them to realize that your body's working with you, and that you have more control. You're more empowered than you think when it comes to your health.
You already answered all my questions. You just keep going. It's like, oh yeah, that's what I want to ask.
Yeah, as you can see, I've done a few interviews where some of these same things have come up, so I feel like, okay, they need to know this. This is important.
That's great. That's great. So actually, the GNM helps you with to know with the question, who am I? It's like totally no one knows who they are. Mostly the people don't know who they are, but with GNM, the body tells you what's going on in your life, or just, and that's it's just fascinating.
It's huge. It's huge, and it's a that's why it's a personal growth journey. For you to resolve your conflict, if you're dealing with a chronic issue, you have to outgrow that old perspective. Right? I dealt with chronic low back pain since I was 18. And I realize now that means, from a GNM perspective, that whenever somebody doesn't support my idea or my what I would like them, I expect them to support, I feel devalued. I feel like they don't have my back. I feel unsupported. And so that took me even after 4 years of learning GNM, I didn't get that until only recently. And I realized, you know what? I don't need to look at things that way. You know, how can I look at it differently? That I do get their support, but just in a different way.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, they don't support me in this idea, but they support me here and here and here. Or how do I look at it that I don't need their support because I have this person, this person, this person. I have other people that support me. So it takes work for you, again, to admit that that's an issue for you. And then it takes work for you to really change the way you're looking at that. And then you don't deal with the excruciating, you know, back pain that I used to have. I mean, even as a chiropractor, I used to have to get treatment because I couldn't move if my back pain flared up, right? And now I start to realize where, you know, as I learn about myself, as I learn that I don't need people to support me in the way that I would like them to support me, that they do support me in different ways, or it's okay whether they don't support me or not, that everything's good. So yes, like, you know, what you're saying about self-discovery and you know, how this is really about a journey to getting to know yourself, I think, you know, absolutely. I mean, that's what the science of GNM affords us. It's this opportunity. Now, is everybody ready for that journey? You know, that's a totally different conversation. But those that are, I really believe they will be able to find huge, tremendous value in utilizing, you know, the 5 biological laws in dealing with some of their symptoms.
Well, and if they are seeking, they can find us and just see, like, getting to know about the GNM, and like I was searching and I found it and I learned about it, and it's just so fascinating. So I really wanted this in my podcast. So yeah, thank you very much for all the wisdom and yeah, all the answers. And I didn't
it's been great.
I didn't have to ask any questions because you were just talking and talking, so it was easy for me.
That's one of my issues, is like I have no problems talking. So it makes the interviewer easy. Hopefully it makes you at ease.
It's great. It's not
an easy interview.
Yeah, it's not an issue. It's a good point. Yeah, where can people find you, and can you your website or do your workshops, and what do you do? Can you?
Yeah, right now I would say, you know, you can always go to my website, dralvindeleon.com, but the main way right now is probably on my Instagram or Facebook page. If you can follow me on Instagram, especially because I have monthly talks in the clinic that I live stream. So it'll be on Instagram for 24 hours. So I think that's a great way for people around the world to get access to this information. I only started to do that in, you know, less than a year since I figured out all these different social media outlets. But Instagram, Facebook, that's where you can find a lot of my content, videos that I'm producing is going to be out there. So that's probably the best way. And you could even direct message me on Instagram if you have any questions or anything of that nature. Okay. But yeah, that's the way to go.
And you still have, you're still sending the newsletters through mail.
Yeah,
also,
so
very important.
The newsletters, yes. If you want to go to if you want to get that newsletter, it's every Monday. I call it the Adapters Digest, because everything that you learn about when you learn GNM, it's about adapting to situations that happen, right? You can't prevent unexpected shocks, so we can't prevent symptoms from happening, but when you know GNM, you can adapt to whatever's going on in your life, because you're going to recognize if you're shocked. You're going to recognize if you're in healing. So the Adapters Digest goes out every Monday. To get that newsletter, you have to go to my website and subscribe to the Adapters Digest newsletter. Just all I need is your name and email, and then you'll get that every Monday. So yeah.
Really do that. It's you learn a lot. So I can advise you that to take that. Yes, I have one surprise question that I do with every guest.
Awesome.
Yeah. With you, it's difficult because you have already asked
So I'm surprising you to have to come up with a surprise question.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah, if you can describe in 4 words your main wisdom. In 4 words.
4 words, my main
wisdom. Just the main
wisdom.
power, wisdom, like.
Okay. Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, in 4 words, the main wisdom you want people to take away, you want them to take away?
Yeah.
Oh, I know. Okay, that's easy. I'm going to say your body is intelligent.
Well.
Your body is intelligent.
Okay.
Period. Because when you really, really, really understand the wisdom of your body and it's intelligent, you don't have to worry. The body knows what it's doing. So your body is intelligent.
Wow.
There you go.
Wow. It's really great. Really, a really good closure. Well,
awesome.
I really, really want to thank you for sharing all your wisdom, and I hope GNM gets spread through all over the world, and because it's really fascinating, and people out there check this out and go learn it. It's really, really helpful. So thank you for
You're
listening.
doing your part with this podcast, so keep up the good work. And I'm very happy to help in any way that I can. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you very much for this interview, and till we meet again.
All right, so thank you.
Bye
guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.